Hello guys, I'm back from another video and today we're talking about what if Deku was an Oni. So in the last video we talked about how, when Izuku and the rest of his classmates woke up, it's finally time for them to prepare to go to the training camp. So, after wearing their, specific clothes for the training camp, they started going outside as they see Aizawa with the bus, which the bus almost looks like a prison bus specifically for inmates, but they just ignored that to go inside the bus as they start going to the training camp. Some of them would fall asleep inside the bus, and for Izuku, he was no exception. He would basically fall asleep as they would wake up in the middle of a large clearing, more specifically a cliffside. As everybody would start to get out of the bus to basically go outside, four figures would basically arrive as one of them would basically put her hands, or more specifically her hand, on the floor of the, clearing or the cliffside as it would start to, make a large, chasm that would make everybody fall down, specifically the students. And fall they would. So, after basically saving themselves, specifically Kineko, Izuku, and Ibara, the rest would basically be hurt, or at least some of them, as they would start to go into the forest while they're being chased by mud monsters. So, Izuku, Ibara, and Kineko would be the first to arrive at the training camp, and apparently, those four figures were the Wild Pussycats. The Wild Pussycats would basically tell them to basically go train, as Izuku would basically start to train with his swords, and for Kineko, she would start to make bigger mushrooms, and as for, Ibara, she would start to learn how to make, her plant-like hair into much more deadlier weapons. So, after the rest of the students basically arrived, they would also, arrive pretty late. And Izuku and the rest of the, students, specifically Kineko and Ibara, are currently just, making dinner. After everybody basically decided to get some rest, except for Bako, because Bako almost tried to attack Izuku, and he has to stay in the, in one of the tents to basically rest up because, after getting knocked out by Aizawa, it would do something to you, let's just say that. So, everybody would start eating dinner with the rest of his classmates, specifically Izuku, Ibara, and Kineko, as everybody would decide to go to hot springs to maybe rest up their muscles after the, training for Izuku, Kineko, and Ibara, but for the rest, yeah, let's just say they really need to get some rest on their muscles because of the whole running thing. So, they would have their rest in the, hot springs as a bit of shenanigans basically happened. As for Izuku, when he's about to, change his, go back into his, regular old clothing, it turns out that his boxers have been changed into briefs. But Izuku doesn't know, or who knows what happened to them, but Izuku just ignored it and just decided to wear these instead. And a few minutes ago, apparently, Ibara was being a bit of a yandere and decided to just steal his briefs and replace his boxers with briefs, So after doing that, she would basically fall asleep knowing that she has, her future husband's, briefs, and basically start smelling them in the middle of the night, basically, let's just say unspeakable acts. And as for Izuku would have to sleep all alone, late at night, basically wearing those disgusting ass briefs, which were pretty much uncomfortable for him. So, yeah. So, that is basically what happened last episode. And so, let's talk about what happens next. So, the next day has come as everybody would start training. Mostly some of them, because some of them are currently tired right now. Specifically, maybe let's just say Ochako, which currently she's still vomiting. Yeah, after a bit of training, she would be vomiting, for the rest of the day. Izuku is currently training on his swordsmanship and even learning how to enhance his strength. What do I mean by this? Well, he's currently, punching boulders, which Izuku is pretty much proficient at that. Especially if he's using a sword. He's able to basically like slice through the boulder just like Tanjiro in the start of like Kimetsu no Yaiba. I can't remember which scene was that, but it was the, cutting boulder scene or whatever. So, after doing a bit of that, and Tiger being afraid if he were to be a villain, that would be, disastrous. So, as after a while basically training, they would be introduced to Class 1B, and oh boy, let's just say Class 1B is terrified knowing that there's literally a kid that's able to basically just like, oh, I don't know, basically crush boulders with his bare hands. And let's just say Monoma is definitely going to say to himself, yep, I'm not fighting that kid. I'm not even fighting that kid. So, yeah. So, as every single student in Class 1A and Class 1B were brought to a specific area, they were told by their, teachers that they're gonna be doing the Forest of Courage, or the Test of Courage. Apparently, they're gonna be having a little bit of a test. This test would basically check if you're pretty much, brave in case of like, a hostage situation or something like that. So, as everybody was told to basically go pair up in teams of 3, well, it turns out that not three specific girls, I meant two, for God's sake. These two were Ibara and Kinako, because obviously. So, as everybody is already paired up, Class 1B would be going to the forest to basically just like, oh, I don't know, maybe like scare them. So, as everybody would start going into the forest, Izuku would go into the forest with, Kiriko and Ibara basically just like locking arms with him. As Izuku would think in his mind, why do I even feel like this? So, Izuku would basically go into the forest with both of them as they would basically hear the sounds of screaming, probably coming from, oh, I don't know, maybe like Mineta or something, which, I mean, is pretty much obvious, so. And they would also hear the rest of the screaming, probably from like, students from Class 1A or something. As they started going into further and further into the forest, well, things would start to get a bit sketchy. Let's just say that. So, wait for a second. So, currently, several people were basically watching the students basically running out of the forest, being scared. As one of them would say this. If that's scary, then I guess you can say that we're much more scarier than them. As one of them would say this. Seriously, Toga? Just shut up. As she would say this. Come on, it was a funny joke. As one of them would say this, being, well, a certain familiar voice. That brat. I can't wait to kill that brat. As he looks completely insane, he seems to be looking at Izuku, as this one muscular man, wearing, a large-ass mask and wearing just a cloak, as he would say this. Hey, I'm just gonna be doing something else for now. You can do whatever the hell you want. As he would basically jump off away, like Team Rocket style, as the rest of them would basically go into the forest, planning on doing something with it. As one of these figures would basically start, shooting out blue flames, as he would say this. Can't wait to see you, Shoto. So, let's go back to Izuku right now. So, Izuku is still going through the forest as he would smell something thanks to his enhanced senses. As he would say this. Guys, do you smell something bad? As she would say this, being, Kinako. She would start to smell the air as she would smell smoke, ashes, that smells like fire, she would say. As one of them would say this, being, Ibara. Yeah, this is definitely not normal. As they would hear the sound of laughter. As they would see in front of them, two figures. One obviously a freaking Nomu, but the other seems to be a girl wearing a school outfit or a school uniform. And, over that is just a simple, what do you actually call it? A simple sweater. As she seems to be wearing some sort of, face mask or something with several, syringes or something like that. she seems to be wielding a knife, and her eyes were completely like golden, and for her hair is like platinum blonde. As she would say this, "Ooh, new friends. And what's with the cutie over there?" As she would basically point the knife at Izuku, as Izuku would say this, "Sorry girl, but you ain't my type." As he would basically grab his kanabo, getting ready to fight her, as she would say this, "Now this is gonna be fun. I can't wait to take your blood though." She would basically start to laugh a little bit, as she would say this, "Hey Nomu, have fun with the two girls over there. I'll be having that thick juicy meat over there." As she would basically start getting her, knife out, as she would basically start charging at Izuku. Izuku would grab his kanabo as he would start to, clash at her, or more specifically, try and destroy her. So, Izuku would grab his kanabo and basically slam it where she's supposed to be. But somehow she basically just teleported away for some reason. He doesn't know how she did it, but he gets stabbed right in the back, or more specifically slashed. Wait for a second. Izuku would get slashed right in the back, as it would create a big scar, but thankfully it would regenerate, as she would say this, "Aw, I really wanted to see more blood gush out. Oh well." She would start licking the blood as she would start to change into him. As Izuku would say this, "What the?" As she would say this, "Oh, this is my quirk." Your blood is so good. I really want more of it." She would basically get ready and slashes at him once again, basically slashing at him several times, as literally as fast as lightning. Izuku can barely see her, as Izuku would start getting, a voice in his head, like something is nagging at him, saying, "Kill this brat. Kill that bitch." As Izuku would say this, "Who the hell is that voice?" As he would say this voice would say, "I'm you. Just let me out. Just let me have my blood. Let me just kill her." As Izuku would say this, "The hell?" Ugh. Izuku would start to ache. His head is starting to ache a little bit, as he would barely control himself as something happens to him. His eyes would start to become start to become even more purplish, almost like a complete royal violet or something. As Izuku would start growing horns, or his horns would become even more larger, and seems to be fusing together, giving him just two horns. His kanabo would start to fuse with his arm once again. His sword would become bigger and much more demonic. His body and his tattoos would basically start to, grow a little bit. And I mean a little bit as in, a lot. Like, the tattoos would start, transforming into more of a pattern, almost resembling scales. As Izuku, after getting sliced several times, he would grab the arm of this woman, this villain, as she would say this, "Oh, I never seen a person like you before." But as she would look over and see his violet eyes, burning with rage and hatred, as she would say this, "Are you looking at me funny?" As he would basically crack her arm, or more specifically, basically just crushes it with his hands, as she would start screaming out in pain, as Izuku would say this, "Give me blood," as he would basically start to, raise his kanabo-like hand at her, where she is basically standing, and basically start beating her to death, as she was nothing more than nothing but, just flesh and blood. But she would somehow turn into, mud, as Izuku would say this, "The hell?" As the kanabo-like hand where there's supposed to be blood is now covered in dirt, as he would say this, "So what the hell are you?" As he would start to look towards, the Nobu, basically getting ready to kill both Kineko and Ibara. Kineko and Ibara would basically see Izuku's transformation, as Izuku would start charging towards the Nomu, basically slamming his sword into its face, basically getting it killed. As Ibara would say this, "Izuku, are you okay?" As Izuku would look over and sees her, and she would say this, or I meant he says this. Who the hell are you? You're nothing more than blood sacks for me to rip open. As his, well, claws would start to grow even, larger, almost resembling the swords that he's able to wield, or the sword that he was, meant to wield, being, the Blood River Blade. As he would start charging towards her, as, Kiriko would make a big mushroom right in front of him, as Izuku would say this, "The hell?" As Kineko would basically grab his back, or more specifically hold on to his back, as she would say this, "Izuku, this isn't you, you're..." As Izuku would say this, "I don't know who the hell is this Izuku kid. The names. As Izuku would start to remember, well, that he's not a monster, but human. As Izuku would start to calm down a little bit. Almost a bit too easy, to say the least. As Kineko would say this, "Izuku, please stay back. Please go back." As Izuku would basically start to change back into his, normal human form. As his horns would basically split back into four, as his collarbone would basically drop to the ground. As Izuku would say this, "What the hell happened to me? Oh, where's that girl?" As she would say this, "Don't worry, you're okay, and I don't know what happened to you, but it was definitely not normal," but as, well, Ibara would say this, well, "Kineko, what are you doing with Izuku right now?" As she would say this, "I'm just holding him, nothing else." As she would say this, "No, look where you're holding him." As she would see that, Izuku is basically resting on his, like, literally just, like, resting on her, let's just say meat sacks, let's just call them. As she would say this, "Oh no." She would basically be reminded of, Ibara's almost like, yandere tendencies, as she would basically get out her hair, as her hair would basically start charging towards her, but when she opens her eyes, she is definitely not dead. Well, apparently, Ibara decided to capture Izuku instead, and basically started carrying him, like a baby, kind of. As Ibara would say this, "So, we should probably tell the teachers about this, especially with, Aizawa." As she would say this, "You're right, we should." As they would hear more sounds of screaming, and they would see blue fire basically going around the forest. As Ibara would say this, "Oh no, this must be..." As she would say this, being, Kineko, "Yeah, this must be a villain attack." As they start going towards, the, wait for a second. As both of them would basically start to go towards the proper, or at least the, training camp proper. So, after getting out of the forest, they would arrive, as they would explain everything. As when the heroes were basically told of this, well, Ragdoll specifically, at least I think that's her name. Let me just... Yeah, Ragdoll would say this. "Wait, how about Koda?" As one of them would say this. "Wait, Koda?" "Yeah, Koda!" As they would start to remember the little kid that... Let's go into a flashback where Izuku, just like in the anime, would basically try and talk to Koda, where he gets his balls, or should I say his, royal jewels cracked. Oh boy, let's just say Izuku's definitely not gonna have children for a while. Or maybe in a few years. So, after that little flashback, they start going towards where, Koda is usually at. So, Izuku was basically, not really told, more like, brought to one of his, to one of the tents where he's gonna be resting, because now he's completely knocked out. As for, Koda is currently being stepped on by, by a certain, well, serial killer, aka Muscular. So, the rest of the, students are currently busy taking down the rest of their villains, or at least the villains that are attacking them, but thankfully they basically survive. Except for Koda, which Koda died. Yeah, let's just say Koda died, and as for Muscular Muscular is actually, currently, oh, I don't know, maybe like escaped. Yeah. Well, Muscular is completely, gone, basically just like, finally gotten the heroes that basically tore his eye out. Basically, the hero's son, and basically killed him. And after that, he would basically just like escape. And as for a certain, what's her name? God freaking damn it. I think that's her name. Yeah, Mandalay. Mandalay would basically be devastated after knowing that, Coda is actually dead. And let's just say she's definitely gonna have a vendetta. And as for, yeah, Ragdoll, she would be captured by the League of Villains, and her quirk would be stolen by All for One. So, after that day, it would be miserable. So, they would be brought back to UA, where they're going to be discussing the whole event in the, training camp. So, apparently, Principal Nezu is now planning on, how do we see this? Telling Izuku Midoriya, or Izuku, because, telling Izuku's, actual origin. Because they do remember about, the whole incident in that Buddhist sect. After all, they did see it firsthand. Izuku being the literal Oni that he was. So, after deciding on doing that, they would basically wait until Izuku has finally woken up. Principal Nezu is currently trying to make up a plan to basically try and make him not go insane after knowing that he's basically the Oni that basically caused so many tragedies. Especially with two heroes basically being killed by him, and also actually defeating, a certain, number 2 hero. And not only that, Aizawa is actually going to be a little bit afraid knowing that they're planning on, basically telling Izuku Midoriya, aka the literal Oni, well, that he was an Oni. Or really is an Oni. So, when they arrived at the hospital, which Izuku is currently in right now, Izuku is currently, still resting. As both, wait for a second, both of his love interests, specifically Kineko and Ibara, are basically at his side, and for Kineko's parents, they're basically trying to wait until Izuku basically wakes up. After all, they're basically just like surrogate parents to them, or him. So, after the, principal, aka Principal Nezu's basically arrived with the rest of the heroes there, well, one of them would say this, being Kineko. Wait, Principal Nezu? All Might? And what are you doing here, Aizawa? As Aizawa would say this. Oh, we're here because we want to talk about something important. So it's better for, all of you to basically leave. Not technically all of you. He would basically motion to both, Ibara and Kineko to basically stay. As Ibara would basically ask, then what is it then? As, Aizawa would say this. It's something very important. As for, the two parents of Izuku and technically Kineko would basically leave. Well, wait for a second. Principal Nezu would say this. So, I heard that you were the ones that basically found out that, that you found out about Izuku being the Oni, right? As, both of them would say this. Wait, how did you, as, Kineko would say this. Yeah, how did you know? As, Ibara would say this. Yeah, I mean, it was a secret, or at least somewhat of a secret. As for, Principal Nezu would say this. Well, we actually planned on trying to stop him that one time. Back before you actually met. He would basically explain, the whole events during the, second part of this, what if. Yeah, the second part of this what if. As after they were told of this, Ibara and Kineko would be shocked knowing that Izuku, was the literal Oni that basically caused all of those tragedies. Not only that they found out the reason how he became this. So, they would explain about the cursed sword that he was holding and wielding and using as his weapon for the whole goddamn, time of his year, or, rest of his, life, or whatever. They would explain that that sword was actually cursed, and explained about, the whole, cursed situation about, Senji Muramasa being the, soul inhabiting that sword, and things like that, blah, 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 as both of them would think in their minds, so you're telling us that, Izuku, our literal, crush, is literally a freaking demon that literally like a ticking time bomb. As, as Aizawa would say this. Yeah, that's a lot to take in. As Principal Nezu would say this. I mean, yeah, it's a bit much. Anyway, I just hope you don't, act a bit mad at him. Or at least something of the sort. As Ibara would say this. Why, heavens no! She would basically stand up as she would say this. I'm in love with him, and I won't let him get hurt or anything like that, especially being called an Oni. I mean, he did cause all of those tragedies, but now, he doesn't even remember all of it. I just want him to have a normal life, with me. As, both of them would think in their minds, damn, this girl's stubborn, and super in love with him. As Ibara would basically stand up, not Ibara, I meant Kineko would say this. Yeah, I'm also technically his sister, but I also love him in that way. As both of them would basically just look at, Kineko, as they would think, great, that definitely doesn't sound like, a certain type of websites like, typical thing or whatever. As all of them would basically start looking at Izuku. Izuku is basically still sleeping, as Kineko would say this. So, why are you still here? I thought you were going to be leaving after telling us about that. As he would say this. Well, one of them would basically sigh, as a certain, mouse, aka Principal Nezu, would say this. Well, we're here because we want to tell Izuku about his past, being the Oni. As both of them would basically sweat drop, as they would say this. Wait, are you crazy? That would basically break his mind, or something of the sort. As he would say this. Sorry, but we had to do this. And we need to tell him now, because with that power that we saw during the whole, wait for a second, the fight between him and the, second number one, the second best hero of Japan, basically fighting, they need to have everything prepared, because they're planning on basically just basically taking down All For One once and for all. So they need to get everybody in check, and more specifically, ones that are pretty much powerful, just like Bakugo and Izuku. So they want to bring Izuku's memories back to light, and maybe make him not as insane, not as fucking insane as his original counterpart, or should I say his more monstrous counterpart. So after telling them this, well, they would basically agree to it. But currently Izuku's still asleep, or should I say still in a coma, and Izuku is currently talking to someone, and that someone is his other self. The one that was basically just locked in its cage. Or more specifically, the one that was meant to be. More specifically, his original self. What do I mean by this? Well, it's the more Oni-like self, as in the blood monsters, the bloodlust crazed monster, which was his original self before basically losing all of his memories. Izuku is currently in his mindscape, basically confronted with this almost berserker-like version of him. It basically looks like him, but except in a cage, and seems to be chained. His eyes are burning purple, almost like a royal purple. His horns are basically large, and instead of 4, there's 2 of them. And he seems to have, a large Kanabo-like hand, and several tattoos all around his body. His skin is like completely pure black. Not completely. I mean, some parts are basically pure white, like his, hands, or technically some of his hands. I mean, yeah, the cannibal-like hand is not technically a hand. So, I guess you can say it's kind of like a hand, but still, anyway. Wait for a second. Some of his parts are basically white and black. And specifically his arms are completely pure white, his legs are completely pure white, and his head is completely pure white. The tattoos are basically glowing now, completely almost pulsing with power. As he would say this, or more specifically his dark self. So, will you finally meet then? So, do you remember everything? Remember how you were the Oni? The monster that you were meant to be? The monster that you trapped me? As Izuku is completely horrified. He already knows that he's the Oni, thanks to this dark self basically telling him. So, as he would say this, so, how do you like that? How do you like being known as a monster, a freak? And what will your friends, what will your little lover over there, as he would start remembering, Kinako and Ibarra, as he would say this, how would they think when their little lover over there is actually a fucking monster? As Izuku would just say, stop it. Stop. I am not a monster. I'm not you. As he would say this, don't lie to yourself. You are me. Don't even lie. You're just a monster, a freak of nature. And you were meant to be just like me. As he would grab the sword, the Blood River blade, as he would get ready to stab into Izuku. As this is unfortunately going to be the end of this episode. Sorry. So, this is going to be the end of this episode. And so, I hope you liked the video, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you guys next time. Bye-bye!